That day, the courtroom was silent except for the judge's gavel. James stood pale, his mother Margaret trembling beside him. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but nothing could hide the truth anymore. Fraud, abandonment, betrayal. Their empire collapsed in front of the whole country. I watched from the back row, holding my daughter in my arms, and I thought, this is the price of leaving me at that gas station. My name is Kayla Thompson, 29 years old, a kindergarten teacher from Jacksonville, Florida. I once believed marriage was safe ground. That family was a rope you could hold when storms came. But the night they abandoned me, 8 months pregnant and alone, that rope burned in my hands. It did not end me. It began me. Pain turned into steel. Fear turned into resolve. That night, my revenge was born. We had driven south, a family trip, that is what they called it. I told myself maybe time together could mend the cracks. James was silent, his hands stiff on the wheel. Margaret's voice was soft but sharp, every word a needle. I pressed my lips closed, held my stomach, whispered to my baby that we only had to endure a little longer. Hope is stubborn. It keeps walking, even when the road is broken. The gas station appeared like a lonely lantern in the dark. 4 pumps, a buzzing neon sign, moths circling like restless ghosts. I asked to use the restroom. James nodded without looking. Margaret smiled, cold, deliberate. I stepped inside, ran cool water over my hands, told my daughter it would be all right. But when I came out, the world tilted. The SUV roared to life. The window slid down. Margaret's smile cut the dark. James stared forward, already turning the wheel. Tires hissed. Laughter spilled into the night. Sharp, cruel, unforgiving. I called his name. My voice cracked. The taillights narrowed, then disappeared. Only silence answered. Only the highway kept me company. I pressed my hands to my belly. The baby kicked, urgent, alive. My chest filled with a sound I didn't recognize. Half sob, half vow. Then, a voice. "Hey, are you all right?" A man stood at the store's doorway, broad shoulders, eyes steady. A woman stepped beside him, towel in her hands. "Come sit, honey. Breathe." Their names were Tom and Barbara. They guided me to a chair under the buzzing light. My legs trembled, my breath broke in pieces. Barbara gave me water. Cold steadied me. Tom's eyes lifted toward the corner, a row of glowing screens. "We saw it," he said quietly. "The cameras saw it too." Proof. The word echoed inside me. Not a story they could twist. Not a bruise I would be forced to explain. I whispered, "Please, keep everything." Tom nodded. He tapped the keys. The screen replayed the scene. Me, pushing open the restroom door. The SUV rolling away. Margaret's smile. The laughter. The exit. Watching it burned me again. But it also carved something sharper. Barbara laid a blanket across my knees. Her voice steady, low. "None of this is on you. Not one piece." I closed my eyes. Despair loosened its grip. Something colder settled in its place. Not rage that burns fast. Not grief that paralyzes. Something cleaner. A map drawn in the dark. I lifted my head, looked straight into the nearest camera. Let it see me choose. Let it witness the moment I changed. My voice was steady. If they wanted to destroy me, I will make sure the ruin belongs to them. Barbara exhaled. "You are not alone," she said. I pressed my palm to my stomach. My daughter shifted in reply. I whispered to her, "We are not broken. We are beginning. That night, under buzzing neon, with strangers beside me and proof in my hands, I crossed the threshold, no longer abandoned, no invisible. Invisible. I was a mother sharpening her resolve, a witness gathering her truth, the promise of the price they would pay. Tom led me through the small glass door. The bell above it chimed, too soft for the weight in my chest. Inside, the air smelled of coffee grounds, old oil, and candy that had been waiting too long on the shelf. The light was harsher here, buzzing fluorescent tubes that hummed like tired bees. In the corner, a row of black screens, silent eyes, watching, recording. Tom pointed. There, he said. His finger tapped the screen, steady, almost clinical. The footage rolled, and there I was. The restroom door opening, my hand against the frame, my face carrying a fragile hope that shattered a second later. The SUV already moving. Slow, deliberate, cruel. The window sliding down. Margaret's face carved into a smile that could cut. Her lips moving, though the footage carried no sound, I could still hear it. The laugh. I could hear it in my bones. James. Eyes fixed ahead. No hesitation. No glance back. Just the turn of the wheel, certain and final. The car rolled past me like I was no more than a shadow. The taillights glowed red, shrinking, until the curve of the road swallowed them whole. The room tilted. My breath snagged. The baby shifted under my ribs, a quick kick like she felt the truth with me. They planned this. The words slipped out of my mouth before I knew I was speaking. Tom's reply was quiet but firm. Yes, that wasn't an accident. They wanted you left here. The words stabbed deeper than the video. I gripped the counter edge. White knuckles, sweat on my palms, my throat closed. Barbara's hand found my back. Easy now. Sit, breathe. Her voice was warm, steady, like someone putting out a fire with calm water. I sat, but my eyes stayed on the screens. Tom rewound the footage, pressed play again and again. Each loop cut me open in a new way. Each replay seared the betrayal deeper. I saw myself, small, shocked, reaching out. I saw them united, laughing, proud of their cruelty. My heart beat hard. But beneath the panic, something colder stirred. Not just grief, not just fear, a clarity that felt like ice. I turned to Tom. Can you make a copy of this? He hesitated for only a breath. Yes, of course. I swallowed. No, I need one for myself. Not just one you keep. I need my own. Barbara looked at me, eyes full of worry. Are you sure, honey? Maybe you should rest first. Maybe wait until morning. No, I said. The word came sharp. Clean. They'll lie. They'll twist this. If I don't hold it myself, it could vanish. I need it. Silence held between us. Then Tom nodded. Without another question, he opened a drawer, pulled out a small flash drive, slid it into the computer. Keys clicked. A progress bar filled the screen. Slow, deliberate, like a fuse burning. I held my breath until it finished. He ejected the drive and placed it in my hand. The plastic was small, light, but it felt heavier than stone. It felt like a blade. Hidden, sharp, ready. Barbara set a cup of tea on the counter, steam curled up like a gentle hand. Here, something warm. I wrapped my fingers around the cup, but my gaze stayed on the drive. This little thing was more than evidence. It was the first brick in the wall I would build, the first spark in the fire I would light. I thought of James, probably sitting at some resort bar, drink in his hand, smile rehearsed for a camera. I thought of Margaret, whispering lies, weaving poison about me into a web for others to believe. They thought the night had swallowed me whole. They thought I was broken, erased. But I was here, and I had their cruelty trapped in my pocket. I whispered so softly only my daughter could hear. They wanted to erase us, but they just gave us the first weapon. Barbara touched my shoulder. "You'll be all right," she said. Her voice was full of faith. I wanted to believe her, but I knew all right wasn't enough. I didn't want to survive quietly. I wanted to fight loudly. I opened my eyes, looked at the drive again. A seed of revenge. Silent, but alive. From this night forward, every step I took would grow from this proof. Every choice would circle back to these screens, this laughter, this betrayal. I was no longer asking why they hated me. I was no longer trying to understand. I was learning how to make their hatred destroy them. I turned to Tom. "Thank you," I said, "not just for the copy, for seeing me, for being witness." He nodded once, steady as stone. "Whatever you choose, we'll back you up." I breathed deep. The air wasn't lighter, but I was stronger. The woman who entered that restroom had been naive. The woman who stepped out had been abandoned. But the woman who now held this flash drive, she was something new, something sharper, something they would never expect, something they would one day fear. That night, I stopped being only a victim. I became a witness, a mother, the keeper of evidence. And I swore, quietly, fiercely, that I would use it. The night pressed close around the gas station, but inside my head, the past began to replay. Memories came in shards, sharp and cutting. They had always been there. I had just refused to see them clearly. I remembered Margaret sitting across from me at our kitchen table, her eyes hard, her voice sweet as poison. "Kayla, it's just paperwork," she said. "Insurance is protection. You wouldn't want to put the baby at risk, would you?" Her hand slid the forms toward me, pages full of numbers, clauses, and signatures I barely understood. I was tired, pregnant, alone in the house with her while James worked late. I said quietly, "But shouldn't James sign too?" Margaret smiled without warmth. "He already has his part. This is just for you, a safety net. A mother should never hesitate." The pressure in her voice pressed down harder than her words. I signed. My hand shook as the pen scratched across the lines. At the time, I thought it was care. Now I know it was control. Another memory surfaced. Late at night, the house quiet, except for the creak of floorboards. I had woken thirsty, padding down the hall. James was in his office, the door half closed, his voice low, urgent. "Yes, I understand. Custody would favor her if we're still married. But if she's unstable, abandoned, it changes things." I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He paused, listened, then said softly, "Yes, prepare the documents. My mother will make sure everything looks right." My hand covered my mouth. My daughter kicked inside me, as if she too knew what those words meant. I backed away into the shadows, carrying a silence that burned. Standing now in Tom and Barbara's store, the memory struck like a blade turned twice. The video proved the betrayal, but my mind was lining up all the cracks that had led to it, the smiles that never reached their eyes, the dinners that tasted of cold judgment. The way James's love had thinned and then disappeared. I lowered my gaze to my purse. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, folded papers I had stuffed away, too exhausted to argue about. Margaret had pressed them into my hand weeks ago, saying, "Keep these safe. It's all for the baby." I pulled them out now. The pages felt heavier than they should. Contracts, insurance riders, fine print that bled with hidden intent. Barbara noticed. "What's that?" she asked gently. "Pieces of the trap," I whispered. I flattened the papers on the counter, my hands shaking. Tom leaned over them, brows knitting. "These aren't for protection," he said. "These are for profit. Someone stands to gain if anything happens to you." The words made my chest clench, but alongside the fear, something colder sparked. I was beginning to see their plan, and now how I could break it. I thought of James's voice with that lawyer. Custody, abandonment, instability. They wanted to paint me as unfit, to take my child, to cash in on my suffering. I closed my eyes and let the anger sharpen into focus. If they wanted a war of documents, I could fight with documents. If they wanted to use the law as a weapon, I could turn the blade in my hands. I tucked the papers back into my purse, tighter this time, not as a burden, but as evidence. A new kind of ammunition. Barbara touched my shoulder again. "Kayla, what are you going to do?" I met her eyes. My voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "I'm going to find a lawyer of my own, and I'm going to make sure every line they wrote becomes the rope that hangs them." Tom nodded, steady as stone. "Good. Don't let them think they're the only ones who can play this game." The drive in my pocket, the papers in my purse. 2 weapons, 2 promises. I felt my daughter stir again. I pressed my palm to my stomach. "They think they've cornered us," I whispered. "But they've only given us the map to their downfall." The night hummed with neon and crickets, but inside me, something louder had begun. Not despair, not fear. Strategy, resolve, the first steps of revenge. That night, the cracks in my marriage became the foundation of my war, and I swore every document, every signature, every secret they forced on me would one day become the evidence that destroyed them. The first time I saw my own face on the news, I almost didn't recognize it. The screen in Tom and Barbara's living room showed me sitting under that buzzing neon light. My hair clung to my cheeks, my eyes wide and hollow. But my voice was steady. Jennifer Parker leaned forward, the microphone trembling in her hand. "Tell us what happened, Kayla." I heard myself answer, slow, broken, true. They drove away. My husband, his mother, they left me at the gas station. 8 months pregnant. They laughed. Silence followed. Even the news studio had paused. I remembered that pause, heavy, like the world itself inhaled. The clip spread faster than wildfire. Phones lit up. Screens replayed my words. People shared, reacted, raged. Strangers wrote messages. Some said, "Stay strong, Kayla." Others said, "We will not forget this cruelty." I read them with shaking hands. Not because I doubted them, but because for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel invisible. But James and Margaret didn't stay silent. Of course not. They posted photos online, smiling at a resort pool, glasses raised. The caption dripped with venom. "Sometimes you have to cut the dead weight to enjoy life." Margaret added her own comment. "Prayers for those who can't keep up with the family." The world erupted. What they thought was clever cruelty only lit the fire higher. People shared the posts beside my interview, side by side, victim and villains. No spin could protect them now. Comments poured in. "You monsters. How dare you leave a pregnant woman? Justice will come." Even local leaders weighed in, condemning them publicly. Their attempt to humiliate me became their own public trial. Through it all, I stayed quiet. No statements, no interviews beyond the first. Jennifer called me. "You sure you don't want to say more?" she asked. "People want to hear your voice." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, let them talk. Let the world see them for what they are." My silence will be louder than anything they post. Jennifer hesitated. Then her tone changed, softer. You're planning something, aren't you? I didn't answer, not directly. Instead, I opened my purse, pulled out the folded documents Margaret had once forced into my hands, held them up to the light. I have more to show, I whispered. Not yet, but soon. Jennifer's breath caught on the other end of the line. When you're ready, I'll help you tell it. Every insult James and Margaret posted became fuel. Every cruel smile in their photos became proof. And I didn't need to argue with them. I didn't need to trade words. I only needed to wait and build and sharpen. Behind my silence, I worked with Jennifer. She asked questions. I showed her the insurance papers, the clauses, the riders, the signatures. She read them carefully, her brow furrowed. This isn't protection, she said. This is exploitation. I nodded. They tried to make me sign my own chains. We agreed to hold the story, to wait until the time was right, when their arrogance was highest, when their cruelty was loudest. Then we would strike. I pressed my hand to my stomach again. My daughter moved, restless, alive. I whispered to her, let them laugh. Let them show the world who they are. Every cruel word digs their grave deeper. Barbara overheard me once. She said softly, you're stronger than you know. I looked down at the flash drive in my pocket, the papers folded tight in my purse, and thought, I have no choice but to be strong. The fire of public outrage was burning, and I was feeding it quietly, carefully, not with words, not with anger, with silence, with patience, with proof waiting in the dark. Soon, the world would not only know what they had done to me, they would know why. They would see the greed, the trap, the insurance that turned my pregnancy into their lottery ticket. And when that truth came to light, they wouldn't just lose their reputation, they would lose everything. I lifted my eyes to the night sky outside Barbara's window. The stars looked sharp, clear, unforgiving. So was I. That night, I chose silence as my loudest weapon, and I promised myself. The next story Jennifer told would be the one that ended them. The storm didn't arrive in thunder. It began with whispers, screenshots, snippets of messages, emails passed from one hand to another until they reached the news. I sat in Barbara's kitchen, the television humming on the counter. Jennifer's voice carried through the speakers, calm but sharp as a knife. She read the words slowly, carefully, so no one could mistake them. Custody will be easier if she's abandoned. The insurance payout is only valid if complications occur. Have her sign, my mother will take care of it. Each line landed like a strike across my chest. I gripped the edge of the table. The mug of tea trembled in my hands. On the screen, bold letters ran across the bottom. Leaked messages reveal Wilson family plot. The world gasped with me. I could feel it through the screen, the collective outrage. The betrayal no longer lived only inside my body. It had spilled into the homes of strangers. I remembered the night I overheard James whispering to his lawyer. I remembered Margaret's smile when she pressed the contracts into my hands. All of it had seemed like shadows back then, unreal, too cruel to be true. Now the shadows had names, dates, digital trails. They had planned it. They had always planned it. Abandon me. Take my child. Turn my pregnancy into a lottery ticket. And now, the whole world knew. My phone buzzed. Jennifer. Her voice was urgent. Kayla, it's everywhere. People are furious. Sponsors are pulling out. But this is only the beginning. Do you still have the papers? I opened my purse with shaking hands. The folded contracts lay there, heavy, sharp as blades. Yes, I whispered, and I have the video. Jennifer's breath caught. Kayla, if you're ready, we can take this higher. Not just the press. Federal investigation higher. That night I sat with Tom and Barbara. The flash drive rested between us like a hidden weapon. Tom leaned forward, his voice steady. You know, once you send this, there's no going back. They'll come after you, but they won't win. Barbara covered my hand with hers. It's dangerous, but you've already been brave enough to survive them. Now, you can finish it. I pressed my palm to my stomach. The baby shifted, restless, alive. I whispered to her, I won't let them take you. I won't let them win. I called Jennifer back. I'll do it, I told her. The video, the contracts, all of it, it goes to the FBI. She didn't hesitate. Good, I'll put you in touch with the right agent. You're stronger than you think, Kayla. Yay. The next morning, I slid the flash drive and the contracts into a thick envelope. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with purpose. The weight was small, but it felt like I was carrying justice itself. At the post office, the clerk barely looked at me. Just another envelope. Just another transaction. But I knew better. When I let it fall onto the counter, it was like dropping a match onto dry grass. The fire would spread. It was only a matter of time. I stepped back into the Florida heat. The sun pressed against my face. The air felt sharp, cleaner, like I had shed something poisonous. For the first time since that night at the gas station, I felt taller. I felt unbroken. That evening, another surprise came. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Inside, more documents. Financial records tied to James's company. Schedules. Policy details that linked Margaret directly to the insurance fraud. At the bottom, one line of text. He destroyed my career. Now it's his turn. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Someone else wanted him to fall. Someone who had lived under the shadow of his cruelty. An ally in the dark. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I sat by the window, cicadas droning outside. The house smelled of coffee and dust. The night was heavy, but inside me, something sharper burned. I pressed my hand to my belly again. My daughter shifted, a small kick like an answer. I whispered to her, they tried to erase us, to sell us, to use us. But they've written their own confession, and I promise you, Lily, they will never take you from me. I thought of James's laugh, Margaret's smile, the car pulling away. They thought it was over, that I was finished, that their plan was clean. But with every email, every text, every signature, their house of cards was collapsing, and I was the one pulling the thread, not with screams, not with pleas, but with patience, with silence, with proof. That night I lay down, the envelope already on its way, the leaks already spreading, the fire already lit. I was no longer waiting for justice to arrive. I was delivering it. I closed my eyes and whispered one last promise to my daughter. Sleep now. Tomorrow the war begins, and I swear they will fall. The headlines came like a drumbeat. Insurance executive terminated amid scandal. James Wilson, my husband, my betrayer. The photo beside the article showed him leaving the building with his jacket over his arm, head bowed. Reporters shouted. Flashes burst against his face. But he had no answers. The man who once spoke with cold authority now had nothing left to say. I sat with Barbara at the kitchen table as the news anchors dissected every word. I didn't smile, but deep inside, something in me finally exhaled. Margaret fought harder. Of course she did. She had built her life on control, on being the voice no one dared to challenge. She went on television, pearls tight around her throat, insisting the messages were fake, insisting I was unstable. Her voice cracked only once, but it was enough. The cracks spread like fire. Donors pulled funding from her charity. Board members resigned overnight. Her name, once polished and respected, became a curse. People who had once kissed her hand now crossed the street to avoid her. Her empire didn't crumble quietly. It burned in public, and she had no water to put out the flames. Then came the knock on Barbara's door. 2 agents in dark suits. Badges flashed, polite but cold. The FBI. They sat across from me, notepads ready. I placed the contracts on the table, the flash drive beside them, the weight of proof between us. "This is everything," I said, voice low but steady. "They left me. They planned to take my child, and they meant to profit from it." One agent leaned forward, scanning the pages. He looked at me, eyes sharp. "Mrs. Thompson, this is more than enough. You've given us what we need." But inside, I whispered to myself, "No, this is only the beginning." Days later, I walked into the place where James once ruled, Florida Values Insurance. The marble lobby gleamed. The security guard glanced at me, then at his clipboard, then back at me with a flicker of recognition. Inside, whispers followed me down the hallway. Employees stared, some with pity, some with awe. All of them knew my face. All of them had seen the story. I entered the boardroom. A long table, cold fluorescent light. The air smelled of nerves and stale coffee. James sat at the far end. His suit no longer fit right. His hair looked thinner. His hands fiddled with a pen that tapped against the table in uneven rhythm. He didn't look at me when I entered, but the room did. Every eye turned. Every voice fell silent. I set the folder down, the flash drive beside it. Hard evidence laid out like a blade. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Wilson, these documents, combined with the leaked messages, corroborate the federal investigation. Do you have a response?" James swallowed hard, his lips parted, but no sound came. His eyes darted to me, then away. I spoke, voice calm, cutting through the silence. "You told the world I was weak, that I was unstable, that I was the burden you had to cut loose. Look around, James. Who is the burden now?" The pen slipped from his fingers. It clattered against the table, loud in the stillness. His shoulders hunched as if the weight of the words pressed him down. Then a voice from the far end, a man I didn't know, older, with tired eyes. "I always knew you were crooked, always suspected. Finally, it's out in the open." Another spoke up. "He sabotaged me last year, cost me my promotion. Glad to see him fall." The murmurs grew. Years of resentment spilled into the open. Colleagues he had humiliated, assistants he had belittled, supervisors he had manipulated. One by one, they let the room know his kingdom had been built on lies and cruelty. James shrank in his chair. Not a king, not a husband, just a man caught naked in the ruins of his own making. The chairwoman's voice was final. "Effective immediately, James Wilson is terminated. He is barred from any future work in this industry pending the outcome of the federal investigation." The words fell like a verdict. James's head bowed lower. His shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked small. And I stood tall, not triumphant, not gloating, simply steady, the way a survivor stands when the tide finally turns. As I turned to leave, I felt every gaze follow me, but no one saw a victim anymore. They saw a woman who had faced her betrayer and forced him to kneel. Barbara asked me later, her eyes wide, "How did it feel?" I told her the truth. It felt like silence breaking, like breathing again after being held underwater too long. That night, I whispered to my daughter, soft against the dark, "You see, Lily? They tried to erase us, but we are the ones still standing. We are the ones walking away." The FBI had their case. James had lost his career. Margaret had lost her name. And for the first time, the balance of power shifted. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was fighting. And this time, I was winning. The contractions hit like thunder, ripping the sky. I arched against the hospital bed, fingers clawing at the rails. Sweat streamed down my face, blinding me. The monitor beeped frantically. "Her blood pressure's spiking!" a nurse shouted. "Stay with us, Kayla," the doctor urged. "You can do this. You will do this." Barbara gripped my hand so tight I thought our bones might fuse. Her tears slid down, but her voice was steel. "Don't let go, Kayla. You've survived worse nights than this. You'll survive this too." Tom stood at the door, jaw clenched, whispering prayers under his breath. For me, for Lily. Another wave of pain. I screamed. I thought my body would break apart. For a breathless second, the world blurred, and I feared silence where there should have been life. Then, her cry, small, fierce, a sound brighter than any light, the sound of a beginning. The nurse placed her on my chest, tiny, wrinkled, trembling, but alive, perfect. "Lily," I breathed. The name filled the room like a vow. Her fist gripped my finger, and in that grip, I felt victory. At that same moment across the city, another cry rose, this one of rage. James and Margaret stepped out of their car, lawyers at their side. They tried to look confident, polished, untouchable, but the night was waiting for them. "Federal agents! Hands where we can see them!" Shouts split the air. Cameras exploded in flashes. The crowd surged like a wave. James froze, his face drained of color. Margaret tried to protest, her pearls rattling against her neck. "This is a mistake! We are victims here!" But the cuffs snapped shut around her wrists. Cold, final reporters swarmed, their voices sharp as knives. "How does it feel to betray your pregnant daughter-in-law? James, was it worth the insurance money?" They had no answers, only fear in their eyes. The crowd jeered. Some shouted, "For Kayla!" while others yelled, "Justice for Lily!" Their humiliation was no longer private. It was spectacle. Back in the hospital, the television glowed in the corner. The broadcast was live. The screen split in two. On one side, James and Margaret shoved into vans under a storm of flashbulbs. On the other, the breaking headline, "Wilson family arrested in insurance fraud and abandonment case." Barbara turned toward me, her hand still on my arm. "Do you want me to turn it off?" I shook my head slowly. No, let it play. But I did not look. I didn't need to. Their faces no longer mattered. What mattered was the little life pressed against my chest. Lily stirred, her breath warm, her tiny heart racing against mine. I kissed her forehead, soft as silk, and whispered, "The greatest punishment isn't the cuffs. It isn't the cameras. It's this. Us, alive, together, stronger than they ever imagined. Outside, people gathered at the hospital gates, strangers holding signs with my name, candles glowing in the night. When the arrests flashed across their phones, cheers erupted. "For Kayla! For Lily!" I heard their voices faintly through the window, a chorus that told me I was no longer invisible. I had become more than a victim. I was proof that betrayal could be turned into justice. Barbara wept openly now, stroking Lily's cheek. Tom's voice was steady. "You've done it, Kayla. Everything they built on lies. You've brought it crashing down." I nodded, exhaustion pulling at me, but inside my chest something fierce still burned. This wasn't just about their fall. It was about our rise. As the night deepened, I lay back against the pillows. The cameras outside still flashed, The reporters still shouted. The TV replayed James and Margaret stumbling under the weight of their own shame, but I kept my eyes on Lily. Her breathing calmed mine. Her warmth erased the last shadows. "Rest easy, Lily," I whispered, letting sleep pull at me. They thought they broke us. But tonight the world saw the truth. We are unbroken. We are beginning. And with a quiet, defiant smile, I closed my eyes. The empire of my betrayers had fallen. My daughter's life had just begun. That was the justice I had fought for. That was the final price they had paid. The courtroom was overflowing. Every seat filled, every hallway lined with faces waiting to hear the verdict. The air was thick, heavy with judgment. I sat near the back, Lily cradled in my arms. Her soft breath steadied mine. I had carried her through the storm. Now we were here to watch it end. The judge's gavel struck once, loud enough to still every whisper. "James Wilson and Margaret Wilson," his voice rang. "This court finds you guilty of conspiracy, insurance fraud, and abandonment of a pregnant woman. You are hereby sentenced to federal prison terms appropriate to each crime." Gasps broke out. Some people clapped, others sobbed quietly. James slumped forward, his hands shaking, his face hollow. The arrogance that once fueled him was gone. Margaret tried to protest, but the bailiff's hand pressed her shoulder, silencing her. The pearls at her throat rattled like fragile bones. I did not smile. I did not cry. The sound of the gavel was enough. It was the echo of everything they had tried to silence. Weeks later, I found myself in another chamber. Different walls, different voices. The state legislature. Reporters lined the aisles. Camera crews waited for history. The governor stood at the podium, voice clear. "Today, we passed the Thompson Protection Act. From this day forward, abandoning a pregnant woman in conditions of danger is a felony. This law exists because of Kayla Thompson, because she had the courage to turn her pain into truth, her truth into proof, and her proof into justice." Applause swelled through the chamber. People turned toward me. Barbara squeezed my hand. Tom's eyes glistened. I held Lily high in my arms and whispered into her tiny ear, "This is your shield, little one, born of our suffering, built for others." Life slowly found a rhythm again, not the same as before, stronger. I returned to my classroom. The children ran to me, arms wrapping around my waist, their laughter spilling like bells. I crouched down, hugged them close, felt their warmth pull me back into the world of beginnings. Lily grew, toddling across the classroom rug. She laughed when the children clapped for her. Her small voice became part of the chorus of trust and innocence that filled the room. At night, after she slept, I worked with a local shelter. I listened to women who had been silenced. I told them what Barbara once told me. "You are not alone." And every time I said it, I felt the truth root deeper. Months passed. The story lived on, in headlines, in classrooms, in the pages of law. But I carried it differently now, not as a wound, as a banner. Then came the conference, a hall filled with hundreds. Lawyers, teachers, survivors, students. The stage lights were bright, the air electric with expectation. I walked to the podium. Barbara and Tom sat in the front row. Lily bounced on Barbara's knee, clapping her little hands. Behind me, the screen flickered to life. The grainy video began. Me, stepping from the restroom. The SUV rolling forward. Margaret's smile. James's silence. The laughter that once cut me open. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some covered their mouths. Others clenched fists in fury. I let it play. Once. Twice. Then I stepped forward, my voice steady. They thought betrayal would erase me. They thought abandonment would silence me. They thought I was weak enough to break. But the night they left me was the night they created me. They didn't just abandon me. They gave me the fire to fight. They gave me the proof that destroyed them. They thought they would bury me in shame. Instead, they buried themselves in truth. The hall was silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on me. Even the air seemed to pause. I looked toward Lily. She giggled, clapping her tiny hands, unaware of the storm she had survived before she even drew her first breath. I ended with the words that had burned in me since that night. They thought betrayal would erase me, but it turned me into justice. For a moment, silence, then applause. Loud, fierce, relentless. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting my name. I stood tall, the video glowing behind me. No longer a scar, now a symbol. Survivors came to me after, some with tears, some with trembling hands. They said, "You gave me hope." They said, "If you could survive, so can I." And I realized revenge had carried me here, but legacy would carry me forward. That night, I whispered to Lily one last time before sleep. They thought they broke us, but we became stronger. They thought they erased us, but we became a law. They thought they owned the ending, but we wrote the future. I kissed her forehead. She stirred, sighed, then drifted back into dreams, and I smiled into the dark, not at their downfall, but at our beginning, because their betrayal was my weapon, and my weapon became justice, and justice became our legacy.